Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack compelling stories and pull out those insights that really stick with you. Today we're tackling a really fascinating figure, someone central to so many traditions, Moses. And there's this striking paradox about him. You look at the book of Numbers and it calls him very meek, more than all people who were on the face of the earth. I mean, that's quite the statement, right? Unbelievably humble. But then you look at other parts of his story, and this same person, this leader, clearly struggles with some pretty intense anger. We see these moments where frustration just boils over, leading to actions with huge consequences. So, the big question we want to dig into today for you listening is, how can someone be the meekest person around, yet also have these, fiery outbursts? That's the puzzle we're exploring. We'll look at what the sources say meekness really means in this context, and hopefully find some real lessons for leadership, for personal growth, for handling those tough moments we all face. Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. It's such a compelling place to start because, honestly, our modern idea of meekness often misses the mark, doesn't it? We tend to think meek means weak or, maybe timid, like being a doormat.
Yeah, passive.
Exactly. But the sources, especially when we trace Moses' own journey, they give us a much richer, much more powerful picture. And what's really interesting right off the bat is that Moses didn't exactly volunteer for the job. He wasn't chasing leadership.
No, definitely not.
Remember that scene at the burning bush in Exodus? God calls him, and Moses basically lists all the reasons why he can't do it.
Oh, yeah, it's almost comical. Who am I? I can't speak well. They won't believe me.
Right. He pleads, who am I that I should go? It's not false modesty. It feels like genuine fear, a real sense of being completely overwhelmed and inadequate for this, monumental task.
Okay, so he starts from this place of deep reluctance, feeling totally unqualified. How does that connect to being called meek? If it's not weakness, what is it?
Well, that's where we get to this more traditional and I think more accurate definition. Meekness isn't about having no strength. It's about having strength under control.
Strength under control, okay.
Yeah, it's power that's disciplined, that's channeled deliberately, not just, flying off the handle. Moses' initial humility, his who am I moment, that wasn't a bug, it was a feature, if you like. It was the foundation. It meant he understood right from the start this whole thing was way bigger than him. He couldn't do it alone.
That distinction feels really key. He wasn't powerless. He just knew the limits of his own power. So how did that controlled strength show up in his leadership then, especially early on?
Well, fundamentally, it meant he had to rely on something or someone else, on God's power. He knew leading millions out of slavery through a desert. I mean, you can't muscle that through on your own grit.
No way.
So his meekness became this posture of profound dependence. You see it so clearly later on in Exodus 33. After the whole golden calf disaster, he basically says to God, look, if your presence doesn't go with us, just stop right here. Don't bring us up from this place.
Wow. That's not a weak leader talking. That's someone who knows exactly what's essential for success.
Precisely. He understands he's an instrument, not the source of the power. He needs that divine backing, that reliance, that surrender of, I can do this myself. That's the core of his meekness, according to these texts. It's what allowed him to carry such an immense burden without collapsing because he wasn't pretending he could carry it solo.
Okay, so we have this picture building. Moses, deeply humble, totally reliant, defined by this controlled strength, this meekness. But like you said, the story isn't sanitized. It shows the cracks, it shows the struggle. And maybe that's where it gets really interesting for us, because it reveals just how human he was, despite everything. He wasn't above it all. He felt things intensely.
Absolutely. That humanity makes him relatable, doesn't it? The sources are quite upfront about the times his anger flared up, creating that tension we talked about. The first big one happens way back, before the burning bush, before the leadership role.
Right, when he was still in Egypt.
Yeah, living in Pharaoh's palace. But he sees the suffering of his people. And Exodus 2 tells us he sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. And in this, flash of anger, this protective rage, seeing the injustice, he kills the Egyptian.
Just like that, impulsive.
Very impulsive. It's driven by zeal, sure, but it's uncontrolled, misdirected strength. And that single act forces him to flee, to become a fugitive for decades. It shows that fiery temper was always there, simmering beneath the surface.
A huge turning point driven by anger. And that wasn't the only time, of course.
Not at all. Fast forward years later, he's led the people out of Egypt. They've had this incredible experience at Sinai. He receives the tablets, the law, directly from God. A peak spiritual moment.
You'd think things would be different then.
You would. But he comes down the mountain holding these sacred stones, and what does he find? The Israelites partying around a golden calf, total betrayal.
Oh man, after everything.
Exactly. And his reaction, pure fury. Exodus 32 says he was so enraged, he threw down the tablets and shattered them. Smashed God's law right there at the foot of the mountain.
It's an incredible image. Righteous anger, maybe, but still.
Yeah.
Shattering the tablets, that's intense.
It's raw, uncontrolled rage in that moment, even if fueled by zeal. He literally breaks the divine command in his fury.
Okay, so there's the Egyptian, there are the tablets. What's the third key instance?
The third one, and maybe the one with the most personal consequence for him, comes much later, Numbers 20. Decades in the wilderness now. Decades of leading, frankly, a complaining people.
Yeah, the grumbling is almost constant in the narrative.
It really is, and here they are again, no water, complaining bitterly. God tells Moses, okay, speak to that rock and water will come out. Simple instruction. Power of the word.
Speak to it, not hit it.
Right. But Moses, maybe just at the end of his rope, after all these years, all the complaints, the sheer weight of it all, he snaps. He takes his staff and hits the rock. Twice. It's like this physical assertion of, I'll get the water. Instead of obeying the specific command, he takes the credit almost.
And the consequence for that.
Yeah.
That was huge, wasn't it?
Massive. That act of frustrated disobedience, striking instead of speaking, cost him entry into the promised land. After everything, all the years, the struggle, the leadership, his anger barred him from the final goal.
Wow.
So these three moments, the taskmaster, the tablets, the rock, they paint this picture of deep internal conflict. He's this meek, trusting servant, yes, but also fully capable of anger, frustration, of losing control.
Which brings us back to the core question. How on earth, after all that, especially the rock incident, can the text still call him very meek? It feels like a massive contradiction.
It really does on the surface, and I think the key is realizing what meekness isn't. It's not about never feeling anger, that's just being human. Meekness, as these stories seem to define it, is more about what you do with that anger, how you manage that strength, that passion. Moses felt anger, sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly, but his defining trait, the reason he could still be called meek, was his overall posture, his usual response, especially how he responded in prayer and intercession.
Okay, so it's not about erasing the angry moments, but about the dominant pattern.
Sort of, yeah. And the most striking example of that pattern, that true meekness in action, comes right after one of his biggest angry outbursts.
You mean after shattering the tablets?
Exactly. Exodus 32 again. He's just smashed the law. God is furious too, ready to just wipe out the Israelites and start over with Moses.
Yeah, God basically offers him a new beginning, just him.
And what does Moses do? Does he say, yeah, good idea, they're impossible? Does he keep raging? No.
Yeah.
He steps in the gap. He argues with God, pleads with God for the people.
Even after they just built a golden calf.
Even then, he reminds God of his promises, begs for mercy for the very people who betrayed them both. The text says he fell on his face, praying, advocating for them when he had every reason to be furious or just give up.
That is powerful. Turning that intense energy away from destruction and towards prayer, towards advocacy. That's the strength under control you mentioned.
That's it, exactly. That's the core lesson, I think. Time after time, despite his own feelings, his own hurts, his justifiable frustration, Moses ultimately chose God's way over his own ego. Meekness, in this light, really means surrender. It's that moment you feel the urge to lash out, to impose your will, but you consciously choose a different path.
Putting the mission first.
Putting the mission, the relationship with God, the well-being of the people above your own immediate reaction, your pride, your anger. It's not about being perfect, Moses clearly wasn't. It's about that consistent return to surrender, bending your strength towards a higher purpose. It's an ongoing battle, an active choice.
That makes so much more sense. It's not about being emotionless, but about where you ultimately direct your emotions and strength.
Yeah.
And that feels, well, achievable, relatable. Because let's face it, listening to this, as leaders, maybe at home, at work, in your community, just leading your own life, we all hit those points, right?
Yeah.
Where anger flares up.
Oh, absolutely.
We feel that pressure, the complaints, the setbacks, the unfairness. It builds up, and the temptation is to just react, maybe say something harsh, or just shut down.
It's universal, and Moses' story, with all its complexity, gives us this practical model. Meekness, this strength under control, it's like an invitation to hit pause.
Pause, yeah, that's hard to do in the moment.
It is, but it's the crucial step. Pause, and then consciously redirect that energy. Maybe channel it into prayer or reflection, like Moses did, or align it with your deepest values. Take a breath. Think before reacting. Ask for wisdom instead of just venting. It reminds us that leadership, true influence, isn't really about showing how strong we are or winning. It's about serving something bigger, stewarding our power, our emotions responsibly.
Seeing beyond the immediate trigger to the bigger picture.
Exactly. And, if Moses is the guide showing us the struggle and the path, the sources ultimately point to Jesus as the perfection of this.
Right, you mentioned Matthew earlier.
Yeah, Matthew 11, where Jesus says, "Learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart." That gentleness, that lowliness, it's the ultimate picture of meekness. Strength, perfectly surrendered, perfectly controlled, used entirely for love and service. Moses points the way, wrestling with it, but Jesus embodies it.
So, wrapping this up, what's the main thing you hope people take away from this deep dive into Moses' meekness and anger?
I think the core insight is that meekness doesn't mean you won't struggle. It doesn't cancel out your humanity or your emotions. What it does is it anchors you. It anchors you in a strength that isn't just your own, allowing you to handle your power, your passions, your frustrations with more purpose, more control. We're all going to wrestle with anger, impatience, feeling overwhelmed, just like Moses did. But we can still aim for meekness. Not by pretending we don't feel those things, but by choosing again and again to surrender our reactions, to channel our strength wisely, to bring it under intentional control.
It really shifts the focus from never get angry to what do I do with this strength, this emotion when it arises? And maybe that's the thought to leave you with today. When you feel that strength rising up, maybe it's frustration, maybe it's passion, when does controlling it, directing it truly serve you and others? And when does letting it run unchecked actually undermine what you're trying to achieve? How could just one moment of choosing that surrendered strength, that pause and redirection, change the outcome of your next challenge? Something powerful to consider.